If you've been scrolling through endless listings, watching video after video trying to decide which DTF printer actually lives up to the hype, you're not alone. The market is flooded with machines that promise industrial speed and zero manual steps. And it's easy to feel like you're picking a needle in a haystack. That hesitation wondering if you'll spend a good chunk of money on a piece of equipment that ends up gathering dust can be paralyzing, especially when the stakes are a whole production line. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. And in the next few minutes, I'll walk through the real-world pros and cons of the Procolored F13 Pro so you can decide whether it truly makes sense for your business. First off, let's talk about what a DTF printer actually does in a day-to-day shop. You start with a digital file, feed it into the machine, and the printer lays down a thin layer of pigment-based ink on a polyester film. That film is then passed through a powder coating unit, cured in an oven, and finally transferred onto a garment with a heat press. The whole workflow sounds straightforward on paper, but the bottleneck is usually the printing step. If the printer can't keep up, you end up queuing rolls, missing deadlines, and losing orders. That's where the F13 Pro's claim of 2x faster output comes into play. The dual-head XP600 printheads really do lay down 2 lines of ink simultaneously, which, according to the specs, can double your daily run compared to a single-head system. In a shop that prints a few hundred shirts a day, that extra speed can turn a half-day job into a quarter-day job, freeing up the press for other orders. Now, speed is only one piece of the puzzle. Consistency matters just as much, especially when you're dealing with color-intensive designs for sports teams or brand merch. The Procolored machine uses a Gen 2 professional siphon system that's rated for a 50,000-inch stable run. In plain language, that means you can expect a long stretch of printing before you have to stop for major maintenance. In a real-world scenario, a boutique that suddenly lands a contract for 5,000 custom tees for a music festival could run the printer continuously for days without worrying about a sudden nozzle clog or ink misfire. That reliability translates directly into revenue because you're not forced to pause production while waiting for a service call. Another point that often gets lost in the marketing hype is the automation side of things. The F13 Pro comes with an integrated shaker oven that handles the powder coating and curing steps without you having to move the printed film manually. For a shop that already has a separate heat press, this all-in-one approach eliminates a lot of foot traffic and reduces the chance of dust or fingerprints contaminating the freshly printed film. In practice, that means once the print job is queued, the only human interaction needed is loading the film roll and later unloading the finished sheets, perfect for a small team that can't afford to assign a dedicated operator just to the printer. All of those strengths sound great, but they come with trade-offs that you need to weigh before pulling the trigger. First, the machine's footprint is comparable to a mid-sized industrial printer, not a desktop unit you can tuck under a desk. If you're operating out of a cramped studio or a shared workspace, you'll need to allocate at least a few meters of clear floor space, plus extra room for the ventilation system that the shaker oven requires. The power draw is also noticeable. You'll want a dedicated circuit to avoid tripping breakers during peak production runs. Those infrastructure considerations can add hidden costs that aren't obvious when you only look at the price tag. Consumables are another realistic expense. The XP600 heads are high-end, and while they're built for durability, they do need regular cleaning cycles, especially when you switch between bright neon colors and darker tones. The powder that coats the film is sold in bulk, and you'll quickly notice a difference in cost between a hobbyist who prints a few dozen shirts a month and a commercial shop cranking out thousands. In my experience, shops that have already set up a supply chain for screen printing inks and powders can absorb this cost more easily. Newcomers might find the recurring expense a bit steep until they hit a volume that spreads the cost across more orders. So who should actually consider buying the Procolored F13 Pro? If you run a commercial apparel printing operation that consistently handles high-volume orders, think sports uniform suppliers, corporate swag providers, or a print-on-demand service that fulfills dozens of orders per day, the speed and reliability of the dual-head system can directly boost your throughput and lower per-shirt labor costs. It also makes sense for an existing screen printing shop that wants to diversify into DTF without having to invest in separate powder coating stations and ovens. The all-in-one shaker simplifies the workflow making the transition smoother for teams already familiar with large format equipment. On the flip side, if you're a hobbyist, a small boutique that does occasional custom